on theology and ice cream. We have ice cream this time. So good. I'll give you a few minutes to get some of your favorite ice cream. Today, we're having homemade root beer float ice cream. Delicious. Because you can't have a channel called Theology and Ice Cream and never have ice cream. So today, we finally have achieved our goal of having ice cream of all kinds. It's exciting. It's wonderful. Delicious. Root beer float ice cream. What do you think? So I'm still trying to find out how I am. Somehow I thought I would be able to, let's try this. Let's try this. We're going to see if I can get the chat. Chat is waiting for new messages. I think we're good. I think we're fine. Oh, so good. I know this is a very poor example to set eating on a stream, but we'll get to theology. And today it's ice cream and then theology. So good. But you're not here to just watch me eat, are you? Or maybe you are. Maybe that's your thing. I don't know. So, here we are. Let's see if I can, what are we up to? Where are we at? We are again on the Channel Islands, mostly because I didn't have any time today to find another video to walk through. And this is one of my favorite places. I think I have a new idea for next week, though. Something that will keep me on task. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. All right. Feel free to leave a comment if you want. And see if I can see the chat going as we go. Hello. All right. We have a comment in my new system. Just the streaming is one thing. It's all the little extras. It's all the little odds and ends that help ease things. And so I'm learning that as we go. But unfortunately, I have like 2 or 3 other jobs. And so I don't get a chance to dig in too much. And today, this afternoon, my wife Amy, maybe you know her. She was actually recording hymns until about 5 minutes ago. Looking for insightful wisdom on anything you want to talk about, something you hold close to your heart. Oh, wow. Besides ice cream. I hold ice cream close to my heart. No. I don't think that's what anyone's looking for. Though if there is a way to provide fresh, this isn't just ice cream. This is homemade ice cream. This is the pure stuff. This is like 4 ingredients. Let's see. Let's count the ingredients. And hold on, we're gonna get to the deep stuff in a little bit. I have to ease in and let some people come in and get settled and get their own ice cream. So with the ingredients: cream, whole milk, vanilla extract, root beer extract. That's 4. So we hit our 4. Sugar. Have to have sugar. So that's 5. And a dash of salt. So that's 6. 6 ingredients. Am I missing something? I think that's everything. A lot of, here's your ice cream making tip. And this is an extra bonus before we get to Spirit in the New Testament, Orthodoxy, which will be this stuff. We're talking about what's close to my heart. This is not just close to my heart. This is like around my heart, in my heart, exuding from all that I am. Tip for ice cream. Most recipes online, it's say if you're making an ice cream recipe to use eggs, and that actually makes more of a custard, I believe, and it's not really necessarily, it's it adds an extra layer of complexity that you don't nearly need. It uses a binding. It doesn't freeze quite as solid, but I find the level of effort expands because if you use eggs, then you have to cook and you have to warm and you have to heat everything up and then let it cool, and it's a whole process, and it takes a little bit of an edge off the flavor. And so I recommend just skipping the eggs. But it's very hard to find a recipe that doesn't have that. Because I don't know why. But let me say, every time I make ice cream, I get a lot of applause and people throwing coins and giving me sashes with best ice cream ever. And this is my jaunty ice cream making hat. So clearly, if you have a hat like this for making ice cream, I don't know if that's why I have a hat like this making ice cream. But okay, let's see. I think we're still doing multi-stream here, and I don't know if we're getting all the comments from everywhere. Soda, yes, working 3 jobs too. Yes, it's hard, isn't it? Yeah, it's not necessarily the time thing. It's every job takes its own mental space, and it's hard to live in all those different mental spaces at once, and you get to wondering, where am I and what am I doing? And yet, so like you, I'm doing, I think it's all good stuff. It's just a lot of different directions. It's funny how in this time of isolation, you read people on, now that you have more time to read books, now that you have more time to do crafts, like, how are you using your extra time? And I'm like, my kids are home all day. I have 2 to 3 jobs, given whatever the status is. 4, I think occasionally I have 4 jobs. An ice cream eating hat is very important. That's right. You have to have the ice cream eating hat, because if you don't have the ice cream eating hat on, people might think, what, you're eating yogurt? Maybe you're eating pudding? How do we know that's ice cream? Well, you put the hat on, right? This is my ice cream eating hat. Now you'll notice that I'm a little OCD here because I'm noticing that some of my, what do you call these, strands are a little longer. I don't know if they're being pulled out, so we'll have to work on that. Okay, it is insightful. It is insightful, yes. This is actually like straightforward good advice happening here. Okay. So where was I in this whole discussion? In case you are new to what I'm trying to do around here, and by around here, I mean Anacapa Island, for the most part, unless I were to take down the green screen, and then you'd see I'm in my, direct from the home office in Sacramento, California. Yeah, now I'm showing my age. This is my way of saying, what is Christianity? I teach theology and church history and, as I say, whatnot at Fuller Seminary. And in my various voyages and travels and adventures through, time and space. Yeah, see, that's where I got the hat. Right. I've just realized how on both those people who are Christians and those people who aren't Christians, there's just a lot of, can we just say it, ignorance about what Christianity is. And so my hope here is to have a pretty setting in the background. You can walk around, see the Channel Islands. This is the most accessible of the Channel Islands, being it's the closest. It's actually not the most accessible to get on in terms of camping. There's like a long set of stairs. But you can get here. You could kayak here if you want. It's like 7 miles offshore if you're a good kayaker, right? But it's a short boat trip. Walk around, have a great day. There's about 10 campsites. One of my favorite places. I have memories about just about every spot here. And there, look there. There's a raven calling from the cliffside, right? Saying, start the content. Stop wasting our time. You can, if you know how to understand ravens, you can understand what you're doing. So here we go. What was I saying? Oh, what we're doing here is, my goal is to say, believe this, don't believe this, but know what it is. Get to know what Christianity is, know what it believes. There's so much bad examples out there. And so I grew up in the church, and I honestly got into studying this more because I had a lot of questions. And I had a lot of frustrations, and I had a lot of experiences that I didn't know what to do with, and other people around me didn't quite help. Hello, seagull, right? You know how it is, right? Never. Ooh, there's eggs. Yeah, that you got to be careful about getting close to those seagulls because they'll just fly up and start attacking you. So you have to be careful with that. And so in just trying to answer my own questions, I just started looking more and more, and I honestly got to this point where I was like, okay, I think I'm at the end of this. I don't think there's anything more to it. And then I was a history major, had to take a class on the early church and read the early church fathers, and it was just like something in clicked. It was like, oh, there is something to this. And so there was this long process of my faith really being deconstructed and emptied out and not knowing how to really pray and just saying the basics. And it's like pared down to the very minimum. And it really then began this rebuilding, and a rebuilding with openness of how is it that I can understand Christianity, not in terms of the culture of it, not in terms of even all the experiences of churches, but what is at the core of this? And it put me on this journey of continuing to take more and more classes, read more and more books, dig into it farther and farther until now I have a PhD in systematic theology and church history because I just keep having questions. And when you ask questions, there's two approaches to questions that I have. Some people, if you ask questions about faith, or if you ask questions, they say, "Don't ask that. That's dangerous." And honestly, it's not that the question's dangerous. There's no danger about asking a question. It's because they actually don't trust their own faith enough, or they're ignorant, or they don't know. So they're trying to guard their own faith or lack of it in having the direct answer. Speaking about the click, what is it or feeling that that I think I'm actually blocking that. Hold on, I'm going to scroll over a little bit. What is the feeling that made this faith stronger? Oh, that's a great question, and it really actually perfectly leads into the discussion today. So I am going to get into that. We did orthodoxy, so I'm going to get back to that. That's such a good question. So orthodoxy, we ended last time talking about you have the right beliefs. And every time people talk about Christianity, for the most part, they're talking about a set of beliefs. And I think that's fine. I mean, this is what I do. This is what I study. So you have this set of right beliefs and like sort of the checkbox. Here's how you're supposed to think about something. Now we went, and it's not just right beliefs about some faith or religion. It's about wisdom, understanding. Where am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to acknowledge who God is, but also who I am? What am I supposed to do with myself? So this is head knowledge, but we get farther. So if you stop there, you're actually not getting to the whole of what Christianity is trying to do. And there's a certain kind of enlightenment version of Christianity that's taken the depth and heart of a very holistic, very human kind of experience and turned it into about a lot of arguments about facts and details and doctrines, which Tertullian, an early church father, said this. He said he didn't want to like arguing over scripture because whenever you had two people who knew their scriptures well and they started arguing, he said it either gave you a ache in the head or an ache in the stomach. It was just like, it's mind-boggling. I think a lot of people feel that. There has to be something more, right? What is it that makes faith as stronger? Isn't having more knowledge. I have a PhD in theology. I teach this at a graduate level. Go down the list of, I have multiple letters. I have 6, 7 letters after my name and a couple of titles before. And yet I am telling you, you can get know and know and know and know and know and know more. And it doesn't have that click. because no matter how much more you know, there is still this reality of trust. Do you trust it? Do you trust that there is a work of God happening? Now, why should you trust? Is it blind faith? No. I talked about the resurrection. I talked about the journey that got us even to this point, about the Holy Spirit, about why we can have this understanding and trust. But it comes down to, really, do you trust that God is at work? And that's an answer you can't. There's a lot of good reasons to believe that. There's a lot of good reasons not to believe that. And yet, we're all who believe, I think, are led into a place of saying, I believe it. I trust it. And it's not a blind leap. There's something in that. And that goes back to the question. What makes faith the stronger? And really, for me, it comes down to a sense of deep, deep peace. It comes down to a sense of deep hope that allows me, honestly, to navigate things like the crisis now. Or let's just bring this home. So some of you who know my story, or who have known a lot that's going on in the background, and some of you don't, but in January, I was told I was losing my job as of the end of June. And sadly, that has happened to me every year for the past many, many years. Of March comes and it says, Patrick, you're losing your job. I think 7 out of the last 10 years, I've been told I'm losing my income as of summer or at some point. And it puts it puts a person into a place of distrust about whether I'm not on the right path. And so that happened again in January. And I really had a sense, this comes out of 7 years of having this PhD, 11 years of working on this full time as a profession, between getting a PhD and teaching much longer so I was all in on this. And there comes this crisis of saying, am I on the right path? Am I doing the right thing? And I had a very strong sense to hold on, to not either give in to anger or frustration, though that was certainly tickling at me, and nor on the other side, give in to panic and anxiety and try to just force something in any direction. I had this sense of weight. Now, what does that sense come from? That's the question, right? How is it that in the moment of facing danger or crisis, and it's not just about me, it's about losing my benefits, feeding my family, housing, and all the rest, this is real stuff. How is it that I'm able and willing to walk with patience from January to this week without getting a sense of, oh no, what am I going to do? And I had some ups and downs, but the reality is, and if you listen to these videos through, you can see this, or if you know the people who talk to me, you can hear me say I continue to trust in this. And then this last week, I was told I have a job, and it's not something that I worked out. There's these conversations we're developing, but it was a sense of hold on, and the door opens. Now, does that prove God? No. But what it adds to is, how is it that makes my faith stronger? That's the question. So you start with a kernel of faith. Can I trust this? And trust is always risk. Trust is always about listening to that still voice, listening to that whisper, doing the thing that seems right. Pray. Sometimes all that means is just praying when you don't even know if you're praying anyone, and taking those little steps of faith, and then seeing in response these moments of working. Sometimes that moment of working is an open door and some example of this great thing that happened. And that's happened to me. My PhD was paid for. I had one of the most important theologians in the last 100 years write on my behalf. And you can go on this list of these major doors that someone like me with my background should have no reason to expect, given how bad of networking and resources and poor and all the rest. And I'm married, I have kids. When 11 years ago, I was living at home with my parents and mostly unemployed. There's all these little steps of saying, I'm going to trust, but God has to do a work, and then he does the work. And the more you take those little steps of faith, it's not this big moment of, "Whoa." I don't think that was into. Insert your own choral voice there. Should I, when I edit the video, I'll put like a big choral voice over that. It's these moments of like you just take a step and you take another step and you realize that every step this path is opening up and this trust develops more and more. And so this season in which I was looking into summer being unemployed wasn't just me out of the blue saying, okay, I'm gonna have it's really a journey of the last many years of taking little steps and learning to trust. And so what has made my faith stronger? Two aspects. God has worked in taking those trusts steps. God has worked, and it's hard to describe the amount of peace that I've experienced in this process. I am there's of course all the bombarding different emotions and all the things are still sort of at the edges, but I feel a genuine sense of peace and hope and an ability to interact with people who I'm not too sure about whether they're on my side, but instead of to be antagonistic, to be actually inviting and to be patient. And that is something that is profoundly supporting my faith. So how do I say, what is this, what the core of the belief? We go to this next one, right? This here's a transition. See, I pulled this off. It's always good when you can make a good segue out of questions. Orthopathy. So Galatians 5:13-25. How do you know God is at work? It's not having a set of facts. I have studied theologians and scholars of all kinds, many of whom have a genuine faith and many of whom are brilliant and know the Bible and Christianity better than 99% of the people of the world, and they don't believe a lick in it. They don't have, or they say they believe it, but their behavior suggests that they actually don't believe it as much. For instance, they're abusive or do these horrible, awful things. I mean, World War II was a great example of Germany, this home of some of the greatest theological training places in the world, and then most of the ministers and leaders fell into the trap of supporting horrific crimes. What does that say about their faith? It either one says it's a bunch of bunk, right? Or two, it says it's not about what you know. It's not just about the head knowledge. There has to be more. And what's this more? And I think that's the problem so many people have been missing, is they think it's just about having the right facts. So Galatians 5:13-25. I'll go ahead and read it. You were called to freedom, brothers and sisters. Only don't let this freedom be an opportunity to indulge your selfish impulses, but serve each other through love. Start with that. What does it mean to be free? What does it mean to be truly free? Now, sometimes we think freedom is about just doing whatever we want to do, but anyone who's struggled with addiction or the effects of bad decisions on the lives of people around them know that sometimes just doing what we want to do is actually a path to slavery. We can get trapped in our own mistakes. We can get trapped in our own bad decisions. We can get trapped in our own history. And rather than we think we're being free, but we're actually caught in these shackles. So what is freedom? Sorry, hold on. All right. So let's continue. What's a good tool to get yourself out of your own head? Woo! Now you're hitting home here. That's good stuff. Yeah, faith can be. I'm working from chat from two different places. So if you hear me responding to chat in comments that you're not seeing, just realize that I'm on Twitch and Facebook. I think I'm on YouTube, but I don't have my YouTube window open. Faith can be hard to hold on to in the face of genuine threats, be they physical or psychological. Yes, that not only is faith hard to hold on to, it's really also faith is really proven in those points. It's very easy to say I believe in God. Just if life is going fine. It's much, much, much harder to say I believe in God when saying that actually puts your life at risk. And not just you're like, someone's going to kill me. It's I believe in God, even though if God doesn't show up here, I'm going to be homeless, right? Uh, so it's yes, that, and for me, that's not a judgment. That's not about guilt. It's about showing me where I'm at. It's a status symbol. It's like I haven't gone running for like 6 months, and I've picked up running the last couple of weeks, and I used to be able to run 2 miles around with at a pretty good pace and not stopping. I can't hardly get 100 yards, right? I can't. I can get 100 yards. That's exaggeration, but I'm stopping and walking like 4 or 5 times during those 2 miles, and but enjoying it. And it's not a matter of like, oh man, I'm a horrible person. It's that I didn't go running for 6 months. It's like, that's just the state of things. So I'm going to read this and I'm going to come back to the how do you get out of your head question. You were called to freedom, brothers and sisters, only don't let this freedom be an opportunity to indulge your selfish impulses, but serve each other through love. All the law has been fulfilled in a single statement, love your neighbor as yourself. But if you bite and devour each other, be careful that you don't get eaten up by each other. I say be guided by the Spirit, and you won't carry out your selfish desires. A person's selfish desires are set against the Spirit, and the Spirit is set against one's selfish desires. Here's the conflict. So the Spirit leads us to freedom. Our selfish desires are actually leading us to be entrapped. And how do you navigate that? They are opposed to each other. So you shouldn't do whatever you want to do. But that's not legalism. That's actually about healthy living. I shouldn't eat everything I want to eat, because if I eat everything I want to eat, I'd have one of those big buckets of cheese balls, right? I wouldn't. I would have a big bucket of those peanut butter pretzel things from Costco. And as my wife knows, it's very dangerous to buy one because I can really just sit down and have a whole thing in one day. So it's dangerous. If you are led by the Spirit, you aren't under the law. You're actually free. The actions that are produced by selfish motives are obvious. It includes, here's a list of things that are good markers of things you shouldn't do, and not because of the rules, because they actually change your brain chemistry and lead you down a wrong path. Sexual immorality, moral corruption, doing whatever feels good. Again, it's not just because feeling good's bad. It's because sometimes the immediate feeling good is actually contributing to something ultimately bad down the long run, like eating too much chocolate cake. For some reason, in my small group on Sunday mornings, we always use chocolate cake as the example of indulgence, probably because it's safer. It's non-judgmental to say chocolate cake. Idolatry, drug use, casting spells, hate, fighting, obsession. Now that's all those like good moral Christians are like, yeah, and then it's like losing your temple. Losing your temple? What? Losing your temper. Oh. Competitive opposition, conflict, selfishness, group rivalry. Rivalry? I'm having trouble talking. Group rivalry. How many different denominations do we have? They need to pay attention to this, because it's this stuff that sneaks back in and causes us to lose our freedom. Selfishness, jealousy, drunkenness, partying, other things like that. I warn you, as I've always warned you, that those who do these things won't inherit God's kingdom. It's not a religious like, aha, you're a bad person, you're out. You won't even recognize it. It's this place of being stuck, even though you think you're on the right path. But the fruit of the Spirit, this is the key, listen to these: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. There is no law against things like this. Those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified the self with its passions, those negative things that make me want to eat all the chocolate cake that I can. I don't even like chocolate cake that much. Why do I use chocolate cake? I think it's just like a safe proxy for all the other things that we probably shouldn't do, but want to do. Those who will, if we live by the Spirit, let's follow the Spirit. Let's not become arrogant, make each other angry, or be jealous of each other. So here we go. So we talked a little bit about this last time. Fruit of the Spirit ends with, what is love? What is love? So if the core element of what Christianity is love, what is love? It's not head knowledge. You can have all the head knowledge you want about someone and not be in love with them. What is love? It's something deeper than that. It's something thicker. So yeah, we have a great capacity to condemn the things we have no trouble resisting, but ignore and rationalize all the others. That's exactly it, because we have these blind spots. And in having these blind spots, we actually, there's a form of selfishness, I think, that makes it all about us, not just in things I can get, but also a good reputation. And it's much safer to point to those other people, But when it says don't be angry, I have to look at that because I got very angry. I was tempted to be very angry over the last many years every time, because it's not that I was doing something bad or wasn't doing my job right. I was actually doing my job extremely well. But it was the context and situation and other people's decisions that was leading to financial or other problems. And so there's nothing I could do. And it made me frustrated with the system. And I'll be honest, there were times at which I said, I want to burn the system down. And there were things I did that put me on that direction. And there's whole things I had, conversations in my head, documents, probably half-written files somewhere even, of things that I'm just done. And it feels good. That's the thing with anger. It's not that it's like this. It makes you feel alive. These things make you feel a form of life. But it's not until you let it go that you realize that there's something richer and deeper. And this is where having the head knowledge is good, because there's things that I know I shouldn't do that I want to do, and it's because I know I shouldn't and trust other people who know better than I do, that I'll listen to them. It's like practice. It's like listening to a coach, right? It's like, why are we doing this, coach? Why are we doing this drill, coach? Trust their experience because they'll know something. So there's a little level of trust in this. So that leads back to that great question of what's a good tool to get yourself out of your own head? That really depends, because sometimes for me, I'll admit, one reason why I like being on Twitch is because sometimes I just have to play a mindless game. Sometimes I actually just have to get away from myself. And the thoughts are in a bad loop, and there's no like sorting this out. There's no journaling. And sometimes I just have to, watch a show or play a video. I've been playing a lot of Civilization 5, partially because it's one of those great games that you can play it a little bit. It doesn't ask much of you, but it allows my thoughts to kind of unknot. And the other thing that I've been doing is going out for a walk or jogs. I mentioned that, but not going for a jog to accomplish getting the jog done. It's actually one of my goals in going outside is noticing, and there's a discipline of noticing. And one of the best ways for me to get out of my own head is to go outside and just start noticing the world around me. Notice the shape of a tree. Notice the colors. Notice the birds. Notice the sounds and noises, and start being aware of my environment, because I can get so caught up in the negative path that I don't have an answer within me, and so I have to get out of myself. The other way, the truth be told, and this is drawing from ancient writings and the early Christian monastics. I know that term is alienated to some people, but they were sort of experts on how to find this progress and overcoming being in their own head. And sometimes they said manual labor, just work. I think this is where exercise comes in, right? There's just a matter of get out and get a project. Find something that's completely different than the thing that you're stuck in. So for me, my job is teaching and online teaching and writing and other things. And sometimes when that's the area of frustration, I just need to go out and, do something in the yard or repair. Like I put a new kitchen faucet in the other day, and I did it not because the old one was necessarily bad, but because I was able to get a faucet, right? And when you're able to get a free faucet, you're like, oh, I'm gonna use it. But it's been sitting in my garage for like 3 years because I've just been so distracted and lost. And I thought, I'm just gonna put it in. And it was just like this completely different sense of accomplishment. Sometimes we just need these little bits, which doesn't sound very spiritual, right? It doesn't sound very like, oh, and then we'll sit down and then we'll ponder on the mysteries of the world. Sometimes the mysteries of the world are the very problem I'm frustrated at. And sometimes I need less mystery in the world. I need a little bit of accomplishment. I think that's probably why I like the video games, because you can have that little bit of accomplishment in achieving a certain task. Sometimes you just need to have that click. So there's all these different things of the most spiritual thing that sometimes can be done is to get away from being so focused on the inner life, or so focused on the mental space, that we just need to be distracted from it. And not distracted that we're completely drawn away from it. That's not, we can easily live a whole life of distraction. That's not the point. It's find a way to get away, take a Sabbath, right? The Bible says take a day off. Sometimes we just need rest. Sometimes we just need a nap. And what it comes down to is, and all these things are a way of saying, what is the thing that gives you a sense of peace? Do that. What is the thing that helps you have a better perspective on the people around you? Do that. For me, early on, one reason why I'm in this journey that I am now is because 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago, 2002 or 2003, so not quite 20, so 18 years ago, and like anyone's taking, oh, you messed up this number today. It was because I was out of a job. I finished with my master's degree in ministry, didn't like church work, had this huge pulling apart of my soul and the experiences that I had. My faith was just like stepped on and demolished. I had been doing really well, but the practical experience of it was just agonizing, because I had this good on the ground ministry, but didn't know how to navigate all the higher level. And when you're a strong introvert and single guy in ministry, it happens. And so I said, I'm going to join the army, right? I'm just going to do this, join the army and get away. At least I'll pay off my loans. So I went that direction, and then ended up tearing my ACL before I could do that process. So that closed that door, right? And there was this point at which everything I felt was closed. Every door in front of me was closed. Every time I turned this way, the door would slam into my face. So I turned this way, the door would slam in my face. Everything in my whole life felt like it was this closed door. And I was filled with chaos. I was honestly suicidal at the time. I was like, I have pursued this to the end of all I can do, and I'm out of everything. And God, you're not opening any doors. It's all stuck, and I'm all broken. And I was living in this great apartment in Pasadena. I had a lot of really great friends there. And yet I was filled with this deep, deep sense of chaos and hurt and frustration and anger, but I didn't realize it was anger, because it had that both texture of anger and depression, and those are two sides of the same coin, but deep in me. And every time, hello, seagulls. Yes, see, seagulls get it. Every time I would start applying for these jobs, I'd feel this chaos, this like stab in my heart, and I would feel down and depressed for hours. It would just lower my sense of self. But it was the rational thing to do. I was doing the rational thing. Then I started writing. Not like I'm going to write the brilliant commentary on this theological topic. No, I actually just started writing fiction. I started writing short stories. I've always been a reader, and I just started writing. And a funny thing happened. Every time I would write, I said, I'm going to write every day. Every time I'd write, I would feel this lifting up of my soul. I would feel this deep peace. Everything's okay. I would feel this sense of, I like me. I like this direction. Then I'd spend the afternoons applying for more jobs, and I'd just feel horrible again. And I said, there's something to that. It was this deep spiritual, again, insert your own choral voice there, moment. No, it was this sense of, okay, every time I'd write, there's a sense of deep peace and okayedness. Every time I'd pursue trying to keep my status in Pasadena, it would be chaos. Do this long enough, you realize, okay, now it makes sense to pursue the thing that helps me fit better in the world. It doesn't make sense to say, I'm going to be a writer, but it wasn't a choice for me, because it was like, where is this sense of God's presence? It was when I would write. And that put me on a path, and it's a long, long story from there, but I moved to the mountains. I gave up Pasadena. I lost friends because they thought, you're giving up, you're abandoning things. And all I was after there wasn't really this sense of like, here's my plan. What really was a sense of, I'm going to walk the way of peace. What is it that gives me peace? And I'm going to do that. And not peace in terms of it, like it just helps me not think. There was like, there's a form of peace, and that's the peace I'm talking about, where you're like, whew, you actually, your brain calms, the storms calm. You can see the world better, the colors better. That's the kind of peace I'm talking about. And that's the direction I pursued. And it was because instead of pursuing the head knowledge, I pursued this other path. And in doing that, it wasn't immediate, but it got me on this journey of, I don't know, can I just say resurrection? Because it was like this, I gave up this old version of Patrick that had really propelled me into about the age of 30. And it broke that down and separated it. And now I'm at this other side of saying there's a deep, deep sense of truth in what we're talking about. But it takes taking these steps. Understanding you have to have a map, right? I think this is where orthodoxy is kind of the map. Orthopathy is the, I'm tired, I'm overwhelmed. Keep walking. It's that courage. It's that sense of there's something over on the other side of that hill that's beautiful. We'll keep going. So love is the goal and the criteria. So I talk about peace, but really what it is how am I interacting with other people? Am I always at chaos with other people? Well, there's something wrong about that. Or am I in a place where I'm finding a way to say, I may not understand what you're doing, but I want the best for you. There's something about that that's love. So orthopathy, I use this word. It comes out of different traditions. I hope it's not distracting for you. It's not as familiar as orthodoxy. Orthopathy, it's just right feelings. Ortho is right. Pathy is like passions, but not passions as like, we use the term passionate in sort of a positive way. The ancients used the term passionate in a very negative way. The things that they drive you without knowing. It's really a way of talking about this inner somethingness and non-intellectual interaction with the world, because our feelings are telling us something. And this is where a lot of understanding about what it means to be human has really went wrong in much of the Enlightenment and modern era, where they try to cut feelings out. So, don't trust your feelings. Well, don't trust your brain either, right? Our brain is just as deceptive as our feelings, right? Or, I mean, our logic. We can convince ourselves of truths that are really, really bad, right? You don't have to spend a lot of time on the internet to see examples of that. So our head isn't really more trustworthy than our feelings, but somehow we have this idea that logic is there and our feelings aren't. Yet our feelings are more primal. Our feelings are saying something about our location in the world. Now the trouble is we're not very good about interpreting our feelings. So we can feel angry, and if we're not really in tune with ourselves, we can associate that anger with the guy who cut me off, or the person who said something a little rude, rather than the actual thing that I'm dealing with, which is that my job has been treating me like crap. We like to associate the feeling with something we can address. But if we actually can understand our feelings, we can actually become better in tune with these moments of frustration. What am I feeling frustrated at? And we actually can read that and understand that, because it's not just something people do. Animals do this. This is what it means to live in the world. We're driven by input that affects us, and there's something in us that knows before it has the filter of giving it logical thought. And I can go on and on about this. But sometimes we need to just renew ourselves and look at beauty, right? What is it that gives you peace? What is it that gives you hope? What is it that gives you love and joy and peace? Joy isn't just happiness. Joy is this deep sense of yes to the world. And you can be in bad, difficult circumstances, and I'm not idealizing this, but you can be in very difficult circumstances and have a sense of peace. And that's happened to me this last year. Logically, this is really hard, but I'm trusting God. Hope drives us forward. How do we know how God is working and where? That's the question. How do we get out of our own head? How do we trust that the next step is worthwhile? How do we know that we're going to be fine. Well, it's head knowledge gets us so far, but we can actually. I think I like the term use these love, joy, peace, hope, kind of as like what does it mean to be in tune with the spirit? We can have all the right music theory, but if you've never played an instrument, how do you know what it means to be in tune? You can have all the head knowledge, but what does it mean to be in tune? Now that's even just the first step. What does it mean to play in harmony with other musicians who may be playing different notes? What is how do you know you're playing the right chords? There's a certain sense of knowingness, and if you're a musician, it's hard to describe because you know there you a lot of practice and a lot of training in that. All right, thank you, Tony. Glad it was helpful. Nice to see you here. Great questions. Those we'll keep wrestling with that. Man, those hit home because those are the core questions. Me and you are in the same place, I think, in that. All right. How do we know where God is working? Feelings are part of that. Feelings are about what it means to be human. And if faith and our spirituality doesn't affect our feelings, then it doesn't do anything. In certain versions of this, I read a long passage from what's called Wesley's Aldersgate experience, and I don't think I have that passage here. No, and I'll quickly tell it, and it's so John Wesley was one of the most knowledgeable. He had his master's degree in theology. He had his father, his grandfather. He was from a long tradition of professional Christians. He was extremely intelligent and extremely hard worker, and those two things make for someone who can know a lot. And he was committed. He pushed himself in the direction of doing things, all the right things that he knew what to do. He was a missionary, he was a pastor, and yet he had these horrific experiences of being rejected, but a lot of it were because of his own decisions and bad decisions of doing what he thought was right in the head, but really causing a lot of alienation and frustration to the people around him. And I mean, he was a missionary pastor in Georgia, and some of the decisions he made there just caused chaos. And he literally, I don't usually, the Rob Lowe literally. Did you see the Parks and Recreation special that was on last week? It's brilliant. That's such a great show. It was like this seeing old friends again, and they were so perfectly in character, and they were all there. It was just this nice. It gave me peace and hope. Gave me hope for the television that we could have that show, even just peek its head back in. So John Wesley literally fled back to England, running away from an arrest warrant. It's like he was running away from the police and had to get away. It wasn't like things are turning bad. I think I'll try something else. It was like he was about to get arrested. He came back to England because he had made some big missteps with a certain young woman, and that's not scandalous. It was that he had given her mixed messages, and guy, right? I love you, but I have a career. But I love you, I have a career. And it was like this mix. She didn't quite know where she was, and at a certain point she actually gave up him and got engaged to someone else, and he still had feelings, and he said, okay, you can't come to communion because of a way he came up with reasons that somehow justified it in his head, but it was really because he just had a lot of jealousy and other frustrations and was making it spiritualized. He was caught in his own head, right? And her father was, a magistrate in the town, and he said, you can't do that. And so long story short, he's back in England, having been a complete failure in his late 30s of how he navigated that, and yet having all the head knowledge in the world. And all those experiences was he came back, and within a couple days of being back, he went to this evening session, and they were talking about Romans and Luther's preface to Romans, and he heard this being read, and he heard about the love of God, and he heard about how much faith is experienced, and he said something came over him. he was strangely warmed, as he said. He experienced this not understanding in terms of head, but this sense that God loved him, this sense of deep peace. And that was a profound moment, because up to then he had all the head knowledge, but that was the evening in which the heart knowledge finally clicked. And he was able to sit in his failure, because I think he was finally open to the fact that he couldn't do as much. And in that moment, he felt God's presence in a way that transformed his life, and not just transformed his life. From that moment on, long story shortened and abbreviated, his ministry really sparked. And from that moment in, I think it was 1738, to the time of his death in the 1790s, he led what was one of the most transformative church movements in the history of Christianity, in the history of the world. If we can look at the Methodist movement of transforming Britain at the time, but also sparking and being deeply involved in the Second Great Awakening, the great and this deep transformative renewal that shaped the Americas. And for those of you who know a little church history, you're like, yeah, but about slavery, right? I mean, do we want these church people? What can we support them? And this is the interesting thing about the kind of transformation that Wesley led. It wasn't about church power. It was about inviting all people into the presence of God. And he was, because of that, because of that, he was staunchly, absolutely 100% against slavery, and wrote very strong words against slavery. And it was the later Methodists, well after his death, who reverted back to saying, oh, it's fine. But the early Methodists were passionate abolitionists. But the world corrupts, right? He had this sense of love for people, this passion. And then we can look at, as that movement developed farther and farther, in the Pentecostal movement, which is now one of the biggest movements in global Christianity, coming out of this, that moment of feeling strangely warmed was what brought him transformation, and took all the things that he knew and gave it life. It was like, you can have a car. You can have a car that has all the right engine and all the right parts and everything's there, but if it doesn't have the battery, it doesn't turn on. And what this is, this joy, this peace, this love, is the battery that gives all the rest life. So John Wesley had the life. The third one, orthopraxy, gifts of the Spirit, right? Romans 12, 1 Corinthians 12, Ephesians 4, 2 through 16. I'll go ahead and read at least one of these. What are we supposed to do with this? So that's the key thing. It's not just the Spirit comes to us and fills us as a way of saying, all right, you feel good about yourself. Bask in the presence of your own spiritual selves and be isolated from the world. No, there's no sense of that. When we talked about the Spirit in the Old Testament, there's never a sense of like, I'm now going to have this internalized spirituality. That may be a season or an aspect, but at every point the Spirit works in order to do something, to be active in transforming the world around us, so that we become the presence of the Spirit's work in our context. Now, what do I mean by that? There's almost a certain sense we become empowered to be God's worker. We become, as early church said, little gods. And I don't mean that in terms of we become like God, G, big G. I mean, we become presence of God, not because we are bringing this ourselves, but because the very presence of God is guiding us and leading us, so that we can know and experience what God is experiencing in the moment. So Ephesians, I spent all that time and I wasn't looking up Ephesians. All right, Ephesians 4, 2 through 16. Let's see here. There's 2, there's 4. Conduct yourselves with all humility, gentleness, patience, accept each other with love, and make an effort to preserve the unity of the Spirit with a peace that ties you together. So I'm bringing this orthopathy back in. You are one body and one Spirit, just as God called you with one hope. There is one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all, through all, and in all. So now you have orthodoxy and orthopathy tied in, and that's why I included this passage. So you see how there's a knowledge about God. There's an experience with God and also an experience in this world. But now let's go into what do we do with this. God has given his grace to each one of us, measured out by the gift that is given us by Christ. That is why Scripture says when he climbed up to the heights, he captured prisoners and he gave gifts to people. What does the phrase he climbed up mean if it doesn't mean that he first had gone down the lower regions of the earth? We read about the descent a little while back. The one who went down is the same one who climbed up above all the heavens so that he might fill everything. God is working in all things, and not only for the people who achieved it on their own, but he's going down and gathering so that no matter where we're coming from, we are able to participate in the Spirit, because in the cross we see that Jesus went and participated with the very definition of brokenness. And in going there, he invites everyone else who's in brokenness to a new place of new life. So what do we do with that? He gave some to be apostles, some prophets, some evangelists, some to be pastors and teachers. His purpose was to equip God's people for the work of serving and building up the body of Christ until we all reach the unity of faith and knowledge of God's Son. Unity of faith, hope, love, knowledge, all coming together. God's goal is for us, God's goal for us, to become mature adults. Woo! To be fully grown, measured by the standard of the fullness of Christ. What is God doing in all this? It's not like he's saying, I want you to be limited. I want you to be, an automaton. I want you to be conformed to this model of a guy with big hair and a really nice tie and in a fancy building. No, he's saying he wants us to be fully us. What does it mean to be mature? What does it mean to be fully human? That's what does it mean for us to be fully human? That's the invitation. And that's where the Spirit is working. Not to say, I want to do this so I can exhaust you. What does it mean for you to be fully you? That's the invitation. The world has a lot of options. The world has a lot of people saying, do this, do this, do this. They don't care about us. So much of the world is just trying to convince itself. What God is saying is, be you. I made you. I didn't make you. God made you. God's just saying that and inviting you into this renewal. But it takes more. It takes going outside of our limited perspective. It's like kids, right? Kids have a certain perspective of what's going to give them joy. And as parents, we know we have to wrestle with this every day, because what they want to do isn't always the thing that's best for them. We yell at them, we discipline them, not because we hate them, but precisely because we want them. If we didn't care about them, I don't care what you do. Do whatever you want, right? As a result, we aren't supposed to be infants any longer who can be tossed and blown around by every wind that comes from teaching with deceitful scheming and the tricks people play to deliberately mislead others. Instead, by speaking the truth with love, let's grow in every way into Christ, who is the head. So we grow together as a people, as a community. So much of humanity has a way of saying, okay, we're going to grow together as this little band and we're going to have enemies over there. The trick, this is the big challenge of what it means to be human, not just in our era, but we're really seeing this in our eras. What does it mean to be in unity with everybody and not have outsiders, not have the victims and the victimizers? What do we do with that? Is there a way that we can actually find unity that doesn't require us to give up our true self? Is there a way that we can find unity that allows us to actually participate with others as their true selves? It's like an orchestra. You get a group of people, instruments together, and if they're all playing their own tune, what's it sound like? It sounds horrible. You get an orchestra together or a band or a lot of just instruments, and they really know there's a sense of, there's a music to play, but they know their instruments, and it sounds beautiful. The difference between really bad musicians playing random songs versus a highly trained orchestra playing in unity together, it's like night and day. Well, that's what God's calling us to be fully expressive, not limited, not lesser. A musician who really knows their instrument has been practicing, and they're not losing their freedom in that. They actually have more freedom because of the discipline from it. Someone who doesn't know how to play an instrument doesn't know the joy of what playing an instrument well is like. So, where do we go from here? 1 Peter 4:7 through 11. These are all examples of what does it mean for God to call us into doing something with it. We can't just stay home. We can't just keep this to ourselves. There's nothing about Christianity that's an individualistic, isolated, it's all about me. What Christianity is ultimately saying is that what it means to be truly me is to be a participant in a community of people. I can't be truly myself unless I'm enacting what I have to offer and who I am in a community of others who are sharing and giving, because I can't pull it off on my own. I need others' strengths and weaknesses. They need my strengths and weaknesses. It's funny to say people need our weaknesses, but oftentimes our weaknesses are actually very inviting to other people. And there's a mutuality that comes out of that. That's very inviting and also humbling. So orthopraxy is just right actions. What do we do with all this stuff I've talked about? What do we do with our head knowledge? What do we do with the sense of peace? You can't just leave it at home. It's help others. And so often, coming back to that great question of earlier, how do you get out of your own head? Help someone. Sometimes the best thing to do to get out of your own head is to be a person that someone else needs. Sometimes we can use that as a distraction, right? So it's not, sometimes we have to deal with stuff, but if like I've learned in my life, because I'm super introverted, there's a tendency for me to want to stay home and isolate and get stuck. And I've realized how that's actually not as helpful for not just as not helpful for my overall sense of peace and joy. It's actually not helpful for even my deeper thinking and writing. I learned from other people's experiences in ways that affect my blind spot. So sometimes we have there's things we're good at. Do the things you're good at. If you love hosting people, host people. If you love teaching, if you're really good at teaching people, do that. If you're a good writer, do that. If you're good building things, do that. If you're, whatever you're good at, whatever that thing that says this is fun, do that. Do the thing that you get a sense of accomplishment out of. Do that. And sometimes there's things that we do that may not as coming out of our sense of fun, but it's coming out of something that helps others. There's something deeply wonderful about doing something that helps someone else thrive. Do things that are part of your gifting, but also do things that help other people in their gifting. What does that mean? Sometimes people need to eat. They don't have enough food. Sometimes people need repair. Sometimes people need encouragement. Help others live in their calling, and there's a sense of joy in that. And that comes from a lot of self-reflection and understanding and other things. And so sometimes you just have to be disciplined. Yes, orchestra members have learned to subsume their own egos. That's right. Because it's not about individual performance, or what if everyone was soloing? It's not about that. It's about learning not just your instrument and learning your own role. It's learning how you live in light of other people. And we have to be aware of our part in the season we're in. Sometimes we're called to have a voice. Sometimes we're called to sit out a certain section. And to do that, we actually have to be confident in who God made us to be. Sometimes so much of our anger or frustration or anxiety comes out of not an overconfidence, but comes out of an anxiety about our role. So we want to be heard. It's like kids, right? Put a crowd of kids or younger kids, right? I'm a younger brother. It's like you don't know how to get out of the noise, so you tend to just want to be more and more boisterous or get more and more attention. And it takes a patience with that, and that takes personal transformation. You have to be patient to work on a team. You have to understand yourself. The early church fathers, they talked about know yourself, and it's a philosophical term. Get to know yourself. Know what you like. Know what you don't like. Know the things that are good for you. When I was dealing with a lot of depression, and I didn't have insurance, so I couldn't get anything else. But that season of depression, I realized writing helped. Sunshine helped. Exercise helped. Drinking water helped. Not all of those were spiritual. There are spiritual sides of it, but all those things were ways of me learning how to help be better in tune. Don't do the things that are bad for you. And if you don't know that if you just have to trust that they're bad for you, trust that they're bad for you and see how it develops. Sometimes people know more than us. But also, if something gives you the sense of chaos and hate or frustration, don't do that. But learn about it. So the Spirit teaches us how to learn. Build up the church edification. Now, the church I use, that has a very formal word. And in this setting, I actually want to expand that. Build, like I said before, part of our role in life and to be the sense of peace is to be people who help other people thrive. Now, we can talk about that in a specific community, but sometimes our calling is to do this in a context where people may not know who Jesus is or may not know what Christianity, they may not, for whatever reason, they may have left it behind or they may not know, but they are still being worked in by the Spirit. Remember what we talked about before, the Spirit is the Spirit of life. Help those in need. Transform it. The Spirit is transformative. The Spirit, no matter how the Spirit works, in clearly spiritual, like, ooh, here's the bells, here's the music, here's the churchy thing, that can sometimes put us in the right mental space and the right posture before God. But that's not the only way the Spirit works. The Spirit doesn't only work in the confines of a church service. The Spirit works broadly to empower people for living, to make people whole, to bring life and wholeness. And do those things, that is always practical. That is always, be the person in your context who helps other people have courage rather than fear. Be the person in your context who encourages others to use their strengths rather than competes with them or negates their role. Be the person who says, that person's on the outside, how can I bring them in? That person needs help. Be the person who does the thing that you say, well, this needs to be done. Do it. And if as a community we're doing that, we're not exhausted because we're all helping, then there's this kind of mutuality in this. Expressed in action, knowing God, knowing theology is about living it out. You don't, that's the Greek and the Hebrew version of knowing is very different than the contemporary understanding where knowing is just having this content in your head. You may understand it, you may be able to have it, you recite it, but you don't know it, you don't believe it. Remember the whole Apostles' Creed that we're going through is I believe. When you believe, to know something is to actually enter into it and to actually understand what it's actually saying. So someone who says, I believe, I know God, but does things that negate or minimize, I'll even like slavery, racism, sexism, all that stuff, they can know God, but they can understand the content of theology, but they don't know God because that's not how God calls us to live. How does God call us to live? Holiness is not this language of separation. It's about inviting people into wholeness of life. And that's what the Spirit is wanting in us above all things. Not so that we can be these super people who show off to other people, but so that we can be people who help others around us experience this as well. I've gone long, so I'm going to stop here. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your involvement. Thank you for checking in. And this is one of those things, I'll be honest, this has been I have been on Zoom meetings or video conferences for like 4 hours a day for the last, again, this is this fourth or fifth hour of these kinds of things. And every time I do it, there's this sense of, oh, I don't want to. This obligation. And every time I feel like this is the moment, it's not me just talking about this thing. I'm actually expressing this and listening to a couple people who said, you know what, Patrick, you should go on Twitch. And one woman in particular said, she has this great ministry among people who online said, you should do this. I'm like, I don't have time. But something in me said, do it, listen, as a way of honoring their perspective and also a way of just trusting that God is in this. And there was a sense of peace. And every time I do this, I don't know why I'm doing this. I don't know all the people who's following. I don't know the people who's going through, but there is this sense of be faithful and do it, Patrick. And every time I finish this evening, I just feel like I don't know what I accomplished. I don't know if I said anything worthwhile. I don't know if this was the best use of my time in terms of maximizing my career potential. But every time I finish, I feel right? Now you know how the depth of how I'm using that language, that it's it's right and good. And all we can do in our daily journey is walk this path and be faithful in each step in the way that gives us peace and trust that God is doing the thing. And sometimes that means going out of our comfort zone. Sometimes that means suggesting someone to someone. Sometimes that means using our gifts and passions and gathering a group of people around us. Sometimes that means asking a hard question and not knowing what the answer is. Sometimes that means just being vulnerable. Do those things. And I can guarantee, which is very strong, confident language, I can guarantee if you reach out to God in prayer and take those steps in faith, that you are going to see transformation happening, and you are going to experience those whispers and moments and gestures, and then this deep well of peace beginning that will lead you farther and to a direction you may not even expect, to a life that you may not even imagine, because that is what the Spirit does. All right. I will talk to you all next week, same time and same place. Have a great week. How do I turn this off?